Hello again. We're going to move quickly onto this one because I think, again, the questioning that popped up there, this one links directly into the first session, to be totally honest, and it answers and kind of delves into the questions that have popped up there. So, and we're so excited about this session because it's the first time that we've had Paudie Kelly presenting, even though he's been on the conference team here for the last couple of years. But to have him present is a real joy because he doesn't do it very often. And Paudie has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to farm systems. He's a director of TMAG Advisory, Farming and Partnership, and he's of course on the Positive Farmers team. And all, his background in Chaga, so a huge bank of knowledge there that we can all have a great opportunity to ask questions of Paudie as things go along. Now, when it comes to me, I'm a person that is probably a little bit slower in the uptake relative to Paudie, so I need to look at all these figures and go back home and then start counting on my fingers. When I run out of fingers, then I pull up the calculator and start to look at my own figures. So feel free to ask questions as you go along. It's the only way you're going to learn. It's the only way you can tease out whatever concepts or information that's put up here. So don't be afraid to put up your hand. So first and foremost, we're going to hear from Paudie. We're going to then hear from, we're going to open up a panel discussion. And on our panel, we have Piers Badnell, who is formerly AHDB, but he's now an LIC grass-based consultant. He runs discussion groups across the UK, and which are all grass-based. And we also have Tom Downey here as well, who's a dairy farmer up in Golden. He's farming with his wife Ruth in Golden, and he's farming since dairy farming since 2018. And Tom and Piers will introduce themselves as well as we go along. So look at just the last bit of housekeeping as well is that so this session is going to run until about 12:15. As always, we are so delighted to have our sponsors here at the back, LIC. We also have MSD, Bank of Ireland and Interchem, and a huge thank you again to all our sponsors because it really, really helps to put together such a high quality panel of speakers across the day, and also to have everybody here who's enjoying the comfort and experience of everything that goes on in the hotel. So thank you again to all our sponsors. On that, I'll let Paudie kick off. Lads, remember, questions, take notes. As I said, I'm going to be here with the calculator, which is always a bad start. But anyway, here we go.
Super. Thanks so much, Gillian. It's a real honour to present at the conference. I think I've chaired sessions at the conference for over 10 years, so you could say it's taken me that length of time to convince the committee that I've something worthwhile saying myself and shouldn't just be asking questions of everybody else. So I'm going to take this opportunity and enjoy it. So just to acknowledge the contribution of my colleague Ashley Primrose, a consultant with me in TMAG, in her contribution to the presentation. The topic is stocking rate, making data-driven decisions. That's kind of a core value of our consultancy business. And in terms of data-driven decisions, it's something that I think is often missing when it comes to decisions around stocking rates. So we're going to go through some of the data here. There's going to be a few calculations. We're going to get lots of time to explore them all as a panel afterwards. So we'll go through it, take our time, and it'll be great to have the panel discussion later. I just want to give a little bit of feel for my background because I suppose I'm kind of pulling a little bit from all these different areas in terms of this presentation as regards some of the data around stocking rates. So the first thing, I'm from a 50 cow dairy farm, and it was fantastic brought up on such a small farm where you had such attention to detail to every cow. I'm now involved in a business well over 1,000 cows, and obviously there's a lot you have to do differently there, but that background I think has always really influenced my thinking when it comes to any decision in the business. Been to New Zealand twice, fantastic place. Real, I suppose, difference what I found there when I first went there, and it's changing now, is in Ireland, up to the point I went to New Zealand, I would have been living to farm. My parents would have kind of lived to farm. It was all about the farm business, whereas in New Zealand, they flipped it the other way, like Mike was talking about inverting. And it was, you should have a great farm business. You farm in order to live and have lots of time away from the farm and everything else. And when it comes to stocking rate, that has a huge effect on which one of those you're doing. Got to spend a year and a half in the Irish Farmers Journal, travel all around the country, meet farmers everywhere, see what's happening in different farms. I worked for 7 years in Teagasc Moorepark on a project, Dairy Career Pathways, partnerships, leases, joint ventures, trying to get young people into farming, and that was using cows to create wealth, to create a good life. And sometimes when it comes to stocking rate, we're using cows and we can be destroying wealth. And so we're going to explore that. Maybe when does that happen? When does it not happen? When it's a good idea or a bad idea? 7 years in Teagasc Moorepark, fantastic opportunity. One of the best research centres in the world. Get exposed to all the top researchers on stock and rate, genetics, different things like that. Left there 4 years ago because the farming business that I'm involved in, which I'll speak about in a second, had got to quite a large scale. And so 4 years now as a private consultant, 7 discussion groups, number of one-to-one clients, courses. And again, just an incredible insight into not just the financial detail, but the physical detail, and then to get to know the people personally and get to see firsthand what some of the decisions that they've made have experienced them either positively or negatively. And then in terms of my own farming business, I'm in partnership with a good friend of mine, James Murphy, for 10 years now. We're leasing a number of farms around Charleville and Cork. There's over 1,000 cows there. And then last year we got involved in a partnership with another couple, exciting kind of next stage for our business, David Fogarty and Katie O'Toole in Kilkenny. So there's well over 1,000 cows to calve. There'll be nine different farms we'll be milking on in 2025. And so lots of decisions to be made. Those farms are growing different amounts of grass, decisions around stock and everything else. So getting to apply it all practically in a business where I'm involved in firsthand has been really, really, really valuable as well. So that's the background. That's kind of the different perspectives I'm going to bring to this presentation, focusing, I suppose, on different areas at different times. So what I'm actually going to go through is an in-depth review of milking platform stock and rate. So a lot of the time we can talk about overall stock rate. What I see a lot, particularly in discussion groups I work with, is my overall stocking rate is low. I'm okay, even though the milking platform could be extremely high. But it's what happens on the milking platform probably has the biggest effect in terms of the profit of the business, in terms of the workload of the business, the risk that the business is associated with. So I'm going to focus a lot on milking platform stocking rate, and I'll touch briefly on overall stocking rate. Really interestingly, the majority of my groups, what's happening is everybody is lowering their stocking rate. Okay, so back in line with Mike's message, it's good to see. But in terms of the data-driven decisions, I actually can't make sense of something that's happening. And one of my groups that I have has always been a 3.3, and basically all the other groups have been a 3 cows to hectare. And what's happening at the minute is the 3 have come back to 2.8 and the 3.3 have come back to 3, but they're all growing the same amount of grass. And so for me, there's a lack of the clear data around what the ideal stocking rate is for these farms. And it's more driven by, to be honest, the 3.3, probably some of the more influential farmers have been at 3.3, and that seems to be the decision factor for the farmers rather than the data. So, and also, as it was with those groups, every so often for the last few years of financials, we got a few glimpses into low-stocked milking platforms, but it was by accident. It was for businesses that were expanding. And always for me as facilitator, it was a really interesting case study going like, God, Farmer John Smith, you were at 2.7 this year, your feed costs were low, your cost of production was down on last year, what happened? And the answer is invariably, actually extra land came off and I didn't have enough cows. So I was inadvertently lowly stocked and we're exploring these benefits. And then I'd say, well, what do you think about that stocking rate for next year? And they go, oh no, I'm going to 3. 3's where it's at. And so there's a lack of data. And that's what we're going to kind of go through here, is some of that data to try and make these decisions. And even small changes in stocking rate I'm going to explore and can be really significant in terms of profit, workload, stress. So we'll explore that. And maybe the big danger when you're going to get into it is, if I drop my stocking rate, I have less output, I don't dilute my fixed costs, my profit's going to get hammered. And for ourselves personally, I would say if any business should be highly stocked, it's probably my own farm business, because we're paying for every acre of land that we farm. It's all fully hired labour. Our fixed costs are probably much higher than the national average. So if anyone should be driving up stocking rate, it's us, but we don't, because we can't make it stack up. But all that being said, is there certain situations where a higher stocking rate can be a bit more beneficial? So I'm going to explore, I suppose, either side of the argument. Too low, too high, what's the dynamic there? So here's my first set of figures, and it's a small change in stocking rate, and we've been doing this a lot with the discussion groups, exploring what the impact is with this change. So very simple change. A lot of the groups, the majority of my groups are 3 cows per hectare. There's kind of a general consensus, we'll go back to 2.8. We'll take a little bit of pressure off the system. We're not growing as much grass as we used to. We're using less nitrogen. So let's take a look at what that actually delivers. So you can see my pointer here. So it's 7% change in cow numbers. On average, farms are growing about 13 tonne in the groups, so they utilise 85%. That's 11 tonne of dry matter available to eat. So if we divide that then by the stocking rate the farmers were at towards where they're going, so 11 tonne divided by 3 cows per hectare, we've got 3,680 kilos of grass. And we're hoping now that we're going to drop back to 2.8 and we're going to increase the grass we have per cow. So 11 divided by 2.8, we're now up to 3.9 tonne of grass. So that's an extra 260 kilos of grass per cow. Okay, drop cow numbers by 7%, 7% more. That actually looks like 260 kilos of grass. And we're kind of exploring, like, is that significant? That change, is that amount of extra grass per cow going to have a significant change in the farm system? And so the first thing we do is if we cost it. So we're dropping stocking rate, we're going to have more grass per cow. So that grass costing about 11 cents a kilo dry matter is going to cost 29 euros. If that's replacing silage, so we drop stocking rate and we take silage out of the diet at 22 cents, that's 57 euros. Which about, if we take it maybe a 475 kilo milk solids cow, it's 6 euros per kilo milk solids. But probably what's more likely to happen when you drop stocking rate by a little bit like that, you know, the first thing you do when you get a pinch is not open the bale of silage. It's normally you increase the meal from 2 to 4 kilos. So you're probably going to save it in meal. And if we're saving it in meal, it's 86 euros. The meal's going to cost us, it was 29 euros for the grass. So there's a 50 euros per cow saving. So that's 11 cent a kilo milk solids, nearly a cent a litre in terms of a 5,000 litre cow. So a very small shift in stocking rate, 7% shift in stocking rate could cut 1 cent a litre from our cost of production, which is really, you know, really worth saving. We'll explore that a little bit more at a minute. And obviously, like that's a small, that's 3 to 2.8. Lots of farmers are 3.2. Everything else, if it come back to 2.8, there's even more benefit. So from a feed cost point of view, it's actually quite significant what we can save at a time when cost of production has just gone crazy and we're all searching for ways, how can we get costs back in line? I think it's worth remembering, it's been highlighted, 21 was the best profit year ever, 22 bet 21, 23 was an average year, but mainly weather, price wasn't too bad, 24 price has been good, 25 is looking good. For me, there's a big sense of complacency out there that, you know, milk prices is going to forever save us, and we know that we're trading international commodities, we're on a knife edge all the time. We've had a couple of very good years, but I think we need to be really careful. So for me, that saving is really significant. And again, just even physically and practically, what does 260 kilos of grass per cow look like? How can it change the actual system for the year? So if we take it on a given day, ideally we'd like to feed 16, 17 kilos of grass per cow. Maybe 1 or 2 kilos of ration, sorry Mike, depends on what's happening. So if we take that 260 kilos, 16 kilos of grass per cow, that means that change going from 3 back to 2.8 gives us 16 full extra days at grass. So a 7% change gives us 2 weeks more grazing, effectively, okay? Now there's a caveat there, that's full days at grass, because there's lots of highly stocked farmers who will get 280, 290 days at grass, but the reality is they're opening silage, feeding silage for a lot of those days. The cows are going out to grass, but they're only eating 5 kilos instead of, or maybe they're getting 7 kilos instead of 14, or 8 kilos instead of 16. So these are true days. And I suppose so this is factored into your workload. We'll explore the performance of the cow in a minute. But in terms of actually what you can tangibly get, it's 16 full extra days. And again, if you go from 3.2, if you drop by 0.4, it's actually a month of full grass. And again, practically the farms that are feeding silage, they'll have those cows out for those 30 days, but for those 30 days, they'll have to diet with silage, and their cost of production is higher, their performance is going to be affected. So it's just really interesting to kind of tangibly talk through what the difference in stocking rate can make. So there's lots of, we've talked about the costs and extra work. So that's the costs, and I think we have a fairly strong argument here. We can pull costs out of it, we can pull work, feed less silage. What's it actually going to do to the system? So 260 kilos of grass per cow, what effect is that going to have instead of silage? What effect maybe is 7% extra feed space? So the cows are going to be under 7% less cows on the farm, more feed space, more cubicles. Is that going to have an effect on performance? What effect is culling the 7% poorest performers in the herd? And I know people would say, well, that's a once-off benefit, but like with genomic technology now and the EBI of the young stock coming in, there's, you know, a real opportunity to kind of, you're culling out low EBI cows, bringing in higher ones. You should be shifting the performance of the business to a higher level with better genetics. That's what we'd hope we do. And then even during the year, 7% lower demand, which means more options of surplus feed to take maybe some surplus, keep quality better. What effect would that have? So this is the output side of the discussion, because we know we can save costs, but you know, we don't want to lose output. And the question here is, with all those dynamics going on, is it possible that there'll be a positive influence in terms of we'll have less cows, but the cows that we have will probably milk that bit better, and that's helping to erode some of the loss the loss in overall farm production. And to be honest, the research is there to support this. As research New Zealand, Ireland, as stocking rate goes up, performance per cow goes down. So likewise, if stocking rate goes down, performance per cow is going to go up a little bit. So it's not that hard to argue over that. And again, just practically, because I'm going to work through some financials in a minute. So if we were saying we were doing 460 kilos of solids, and we drop stocking rate, performance should go up by, even if we assume 3%, which is a tiny, tiny amount proportionately. So we'll drop stock numbers by 7%, productions go up by 4%. Unfortunately, if you do that right now, we can't guarantee that that's going to happen in 2025. Weather's going to be different. 1 year to the next is hard to compare. But over a 5-year term or 10-year term, or for the future of your farm business, if you were to make these changes and have those things working in your favour instead of against you, would you get 3% more per cow, which will help reduce the loss in output? I think it's fair to say that you would. And again, just exploring, these are the discussion group debates that I see right throughout the year, in terms of, we're in the spring and we're going through, we've everybody's grass, and it's like, Farmer John Smith, you're only feeding 5 kilos of grass. Oh yeah, no, look, yeah, I don't have it available, the budget's too tight, don't have enough grass per cow to get me through the spring. There's going to be a hit in performance. During the summer, see it a lot, farmers that are very highly stocked, maybe pushing for a lot of winter feed because they're tight. We've seen very strong variability to our summer growth rates. It used to be that higher stock farms would get pinched on the shoulders of the year in the spring and the autumn, but we've seen much more inconsistent summer growth rates for the last few years, certainly in Ireland, and I think that's been the experience for grass-based farmers in the UK. So now they're getting hammered in the summer as well, and they're getting hit there. The same in the autumn, more silage needs to be fed, more cost, potentially lower production. And then even just in terms of, you're constantly under pressure for your winter feed, so probably have less quality feed, and you're under pressure there. So they're all hammering, they're all working against the higher stocking rate in terms of performance. But that's the cow, and actually I think we need to actually look at it from the grass point of view, which is the bottom point there. And because we're seeing it now in those clients that I have at low milking platform stocking rates, they don't have to open at 1,000 kilos of an average farm cover in the spring, because the grass budget can see it through at 800. They don't have to close as high. They can work with lower covers, which is much more favourable to clover. You have more tillering over the winter. So this is not just actually about the cow, but its effect that lower stocking rate system can have on the grass as well, and that's really working in your favour. So again, these are a set of finances that I want to talk through. And if we play out everything we've talked about there, let's play out the drop in feed costs, which we think we can get. There's going to be some kind of increase in fixed costs, presumably, because we've got less dilution. And how does that actually play out from a profit point of view? So if we take two scenarios there, an 80 hectare farm, milking platform, 3 cows to the hectare, we'll say is our baseline scenario, or that 7% drop in cow numbers, 2.8. So like it's 16 cows, it seems almost inconsequential, 260 kilos of grass, is it that significant? But for me, crunching all the data, it actually is, it can be very significant. We've done this for a particular client that we have 200,000 euros of fixed costs, so quite a high level of fixed costs for a 240 cow farm. That's a lease milking platform, fully all labour, fully costed. It would include interest on debt as our 200,000. So the same fixed costs. If we drop our cow numbers, we have the same fixed cost. That's a lot of times what stops people making this decision. But let's play it through. So on this farm, we've 110,000 kilos of solids for our higher stocked milking platform. We're going to get more solids per cow at a lower stocking rate, but still we've got less kilos of milk solids. We've got less dilution happening. We follow it through 200,000 euros of fixed costs divided by 110,000 kilos of milk solids. Our fixed costs are €1.81 per kilo milk solids. In the lower stock situation, our fixed costs, we're obviously dividing by less kilos of milk solids. Our fixed costs have gone up, and that's often what really concerns people. And they've gone up €1.88 versus 1.81, so they've gone up 7 cents per kilo milk solids. Okay, which in a total cost of production that is maybe €4.50. That's quite a small change. But let's follow it through. Like we've already talked about the change in feed costs. If we swap that 260 kilos that we've saved, if we swap silage for grass, we've already saved 6 cents a kilo milk solids. So we've in that situation, our cost of production, overall cost of production hasn't changed. If we're swapping grass for meal, we're saving 11 cents per kilo milk solids. So our cost of production, milking less cows, has actually gone down. Okay, which is actually, when we were doing some of these figures, we were quite surprised to see that little change in fixed costs. That's how little fixed costs changed, and what you were saving in feed costs was more than compensating you for it. And to be honest, myself and James, when we started the partnership in 2016, leased our first farm, we crunched these figures and we actually couldn't see how, even though our fixed costs were so high, we were going to be able to dilute it with the cost of feed coming in. And I'll explore the cost of feed in a minute, because that is a big dynamic. If the feed is cheaper, then it changes the dynamic. But on average, we could just never see the point that we weren't going to, what dilution we'd achieve with fixed costs. We were just going to add in variable costs. And that's before we applied some of the science that Mike talked about, whereby when you change your system and you've got higher feed costs, what the research says is the costs go up proportionally more than what you think. So theoretically here, we could be building in even more savings by that drop in cow numbers, because it just tends to deliver lower cost of production. So very, very strong in terms of the financial performance. And we've done this with several groups, and we've been, the feedback has been really, really positive in terms of what the actual change is. The one caveat being, we'll have lower cost per kilo of milk solids. We are selling totally less milk solids from the farm. So our profit per farm, we're not seeing a massive change. So we're milking less cows, we're still making the same profit we are before, which is a good outcome. But our cost of production is lower, and that comes back to that future resilience of the business. And positioning yourself to be able to manage highs and lows in milk price, which we haven't really seen for the last few years. But I think we have to be very, very mindful that it might not be far away. So that's the financial, the feed. We're saving the feed. The cost and output is not that significant. Overall, to say that we're going to make more money from less cows is a pretty strong argument that it's possible. And that's before, and this is some of the things that I think are actually worth a lot and are hard to value. 7% less cows, 7% less slurry storage, 7% less pressure. Tanks are filling up this time of year, taking a lot of pressure from the system. 7% less cows to calve, 7% less calves to rear, 7% shorter milking. So like a 0.2 cows per hectare change in terms of the practically running it through for the farm business. There's a lot of benefits to it outside of just the financial ones that we've talked about. So hopefully from all that, we've kind of established that even a small change in stocking rate can be quite beneficial. But the question then is, well, okay, what, like 0.2 from where? What should my stocking rate be at? Where should I be pitching it for my business? And that's what we're going to go through for the next few slides. And that really needs to be driven by a feed budget. And it's going to be farm specific. What grass can you grow? And I'll talk through all this in a second. What grass can your farm grow? And based on that, how many cows should you milk? And we're going to explore all that now. And I think the best way of exploring that is with a good feed budget. So this is a 12-month feed budget for an average cow on a farm where the mean calving date, spring block calving farm, average calving date is 20th of February. So we'll just walk it through month by month in terms of maybe what we're targeting to feed per month. And then let's look at that in terms of a yearly basis. So January, all our cows are dry, 12 kilos of silage, dry matter for our dry cows should see as true. 50% maybe plus of the herd calved in 2 weeks. We might get out to grass for depending how dry the farm is, and that's a big variable here. If we say 6 kilos of grass, 4 meal, 5 silage. There's some interesting stuff and research happening around intakes, and I would have a concern in terms of a lot of cows, depending on live weight, depending on production potential, but like Chogus's research is that like a freshly calved cow can eat 13 kilos of dry matter. So that's why I have 15 on average for the month of February. And in terms of total or peak intake then around June, July, I've budgeted for 18 here, which I don't think is too ambitious, 18 total kilos of intake. So we'll work it through, get to April, we'll try and get off silage altogether, maybe 3 kilos a meal. This is a kind of in terms of the meal feeding here, back to one for the summer, maybe to cover minerals, small build up. That's working out about 750 kilos fresh weight as a target. The average in 2024 was 1.3 tonne in Irish dairying, which is just way beyond that. So I'd be quite happy if I could get my groups and my clients back to this level of feeding, and we'd work on it until it can be reduced further from there, as Mike was saying. So that's your meal feeding, 18 kilos during the summer, back towards maybe we're out at grass for maybe a third of November. Again, drier farms can do better than this. And to be honest, like this, when working through this budget and trying to put data for our clients in terms of how much grass you need to have per cow, we'll work it through that works out at 4,000 kilos of grass. So if you want to achieve that kind of a system where you're dropping meal to very low levels during the summer, you're feeding very low levels of silage or reasonably low levels of silage February, March, nothing in October, which would be foreign for all high stock farms. You're looking at 4,000 kilos of utilised grass per cow, 659 kilos of dry matter for meal, so that'd be about 750 fresh weight, and about 1.3 tonne of dry matter of silage fed between dry cow silage and milking cow silage. So that's the feed budget for me that needs to drive your decision around how many cows you milk on the farm, and we'll follow that through in a minute. But like what's for me is a bit scary is that's like a lot of farmers in Ireland didn't achieve that last year, and we had a challenging year grass growth wise. That means best case scenario, you're getting 4,000 kilos of grass in, which is 67% of the total dry matter intake. So in a grass-rich system, the best you can, or close to the best you might be able to do, is 2/3 of your diet for the year will be grazed grass. 1/3 is going to be expensive feed. That's if you're appropriately stocked. And if you're stocked higher than what grass you can grow, then the 2/3 is not going to be possible. You're going to be back at 50%. And that's your in terms of controlling your overall cost of production, going back to the 260 kilos, that's going to be very difficult to do. So for me, that's the feed budget we're working on. It's 4,000 kilos of grass per cow. That's what we want to try and have available to have a grass-rich system. And so let's work that through. 4,000 kilos of grass per cow. We'll take 3 different stocking rates, growing 12 tonne, 13 tonne, 14 tonne, utilising 85%, so that gives us 10.2, 11, 11.9 tonne. And we're just dividing each of those by 4,000 kilos of grass, because that's what on the milking platform we want to eat. And this is where the overall stocking rate can confuse things, because you might have a low overall stocking rate, but it's what's happening on the milking platform determines the diet of your milking cows. So we follow that through. At 12 tonne, we should have a milking platform stocked at 2.5 cows to the hectare. At 13 tonne, the milking platform should be at 2.7, and at 14 tonne, it should be at 3. And maybe, for the majority of the groups, my groups, a few years ago when they were using 260, 270 kilos of nitrogen, the 14 tonne was quite achievable. We're back now to 220. There's still definitely the better farms can do it, but in terms of trying to achieve that going forward, 3 cows to the hectare is going to be quite difficult. And so if we follow through what's practically happening, and I see this play out year in, year out at the financial meetings, is the farm grows 13, but we stocked it at 3 cows to the hectare anyway, because 3 cows is the magical figure that culturally seems to have been embedded into Irish dairying. And so 11 tonne divided by 3, we're back at 3,000, we'll say 700 kilos of grass per cow. And then, so that's 300 kilos off what we needed to have a grass-rich system. Come to profit monitor meeting, we'll have the review. John Smith, your feed costs are high. Yeah, I fed a tonne of meal again. I don't know why. And it plays out. But it's the maths, it's the data. You actually can't escape. When you make your stocking rate decision, you set what your feed bill is going to be for the year, barring you get an exceptional year of grass growth. So that's 3 cows to the hectare, so we're about 300 kilos off. And then likewise, if it's 12 tonne, 3 cows to the hectare, you can see there we've dropped another, we're 600 kilos per cow now off where we want it to be. That has to be expensive meal, expensive silage, feed costs go up, production per cow goes down, and is it really actually paying is the question. And we've kind of covered some of those finances. So that's what's happening on the milking platform. And a really good rule for me is actually, like you kind of see it, and we'd always look at this, roughly 70% of all the land that you farm should be milking platform, and that varies a little bit depending on maybe plus or minus 10% depending on if you've heifers or not, because invariably what we see happening is the farm that's here growing 12 tonnes, stocked to 3 cows to the hectare, they can only feed 3,400 kilos of grass per cow. That's all they have, it's all that's possible. So invariably the silage bill has to go up, they have to make more silage, they start to rent more out farms, cost of those farms, we'll go through that in a minute, and it's just not, and then the whole cost, rent goes up, contracting goes up, they're making more silage. You can just see it time and time again, it's happening all over the country. So that is it. Once I see that go below 70%, there's invariable cost creep going to go up. And yes, you can say, okay, my overall stocking rate is low, but it's what's happening on the milking platform is actually driving the business. So if we come to your overall stocking rate, just to address it, because it is important from a feed security point of view. If you go back to our budget there, we were 4 tonne of grass, we were 1.3 tonne of silage. So at least 5 tonne, you could even say 5.3 tonne of dry matter per cow in forage is what we need. So if you do just the exact same maths, 12 tonne, utilise 10.2, as I go through it here, divided by 5 is 2 cows to the hectare of an overall. That means should be self-sufficient in terms of the farm business, and it's 2.4 for a farm growing 14. So again, like, if you were growing 14 tonne as a consultant, I would be encouraging you to milk 3 cows to the hectare on the milking platform. I would be saying, can we get to 2.4 overall? It should be manageable for you, but it's about this kind of resilient feed system and trying to manage our cost of production. And so that's the two together. If you want to match them, 3 and 2.4, 2.7 and 2.2, 2.5 and 2 in terms of overall and milking platform stocking rate. So that's all the stocking rate piece, and that's the top side of the line in terms of what we're going to grow. And then I'm coming back to my 50 cow upbringing, where we knew every cow on the farm, we knew the grandmother, we knew the dam, the granddam. We were looking at each heifer calf for 2 years, can't wait to see what they're like compared to all the other family members in the tree. That comes back to my 50 cow upbringing. And that's where you come back to, like, the cows. We talked all about the feed system, but what about the cows that they're actually going into and what effect did they have? And just an interesting kind of caveat is that for whatever your target production is per cow, and I know talking production per cow is a dangerous target, but I'm just going to use it here to articulate a point around what cows we should be keeping. if you want to achieve 475 and you do the maths as regards the amount of young stock you have, 18% first calvers, 16% second calvers, whatever your target is, you need your mature cows to do 6% over whatever the herd average is going to be, if you get me, because you're going to have lots of young animals that can't achieve the average. So you need your mature cows really performing to bring up your average, basically. And so, like, if you need in this situation, we need our mature cows doing over 500 kilos of solids to average 475. So, in that group of cows, if there's cows doing less than 425 solids, that's going to really, make it difficult to achieve that average of 500. Or if your target is 450, then it'll be 475 is what you'll need your mature cows to do, or you can adjust those figures for yourself. But the point is just the amount, the target that we need our mature cows to be performing really well. And I'll go through this and zoom in on this in a second, but it's the ICBF produce this milk recording report for farmers every year, and it highlights your top 10 cows and your bottom 10 cows for every lactation group. So your first calvers, top 10, bottom 10, your second calvers, your third calvers. And Ashley and I, for every farm that we would go to, would analyse this report just to see how many poor performing cows farmers are carrying and what effect is that having on the feed system. And really interestingly, like this, looking at this report, even though it's the bottom 10 cows, it actually tells us so much about where the average will be, because where the bottom 10 cows are poor, the average is going to be very poor. Where the bottom 10 cows are actually quite decent and maybe up around 450 solids, the farm's performance is going to be really good. And it's like, I think I read this in James Clear's Atomic Habits. You don't rise to the standards of goals that we set for ourselves. You don't rise, you say, I want to achieve 450 kilos of milk solids. You don't rise to that standard. You fall to the minimum standards you're willing to accept on your farm. And for myself and Ashley's experience, when we go through this, I'd say 9 times out of 10, when we look at the bottom 10 cows on the farm, they're not worth keeping. And so we just zoom in here. This is a farmer, 300 plus cows. They're his bottom 10 cows from third plus lactation. This was quite a high performing farm. Very few of them doing over 425 solids. Good few older cows in that, but it's the same report over. We see a lot of poor performing cows on farm. And when you match that then with everything we've talked about stocking rate, you're thinking, why are we putting ourselves under a feed system point of view to milk some of these cows that are not performing as well? So that's why I want to box off the cow side of the argument as well. To explore the two sides of it then, I want to talk about going too low and going too high, and is there maybe potential pros and cons for either? And what's fantastic is with 2 clients this year, for the first time in my career, we've had the discussion around, I want to stock my milking platform at 2.5 cows to the hectare. Is it financially possible to do so? What are the pros and cons of it? And we've had some absolutely fantastic conversations as regards running a grass-rich system and tweaks that we could actually make because we're under less pressure for feed and how we'd manage that. So the first thing is, and we've had good milk prices, but so far the farmers are very, very happy with the system. A lot less pressure, good levels of profit. And the challenge actually becomes, can we utilise that amount of grass? If we go back to that feed budget, can we actually develop a farm system that will allow us to eat more than 4,000 kilos of grass per cow? And that's what you'll see here. So like if the farm is growing 13 tonne, which these farms would have been, if they were growing 12 tonne, then 2.5 was the correct figure. But these are actually saying, I could theoretically even increase my stocking rate a little bit more, but I don't want to. I'm going to keep my cows at 2.5. I'm going to increase my grass per cow, and what effect will that have on my farm system? So if we just do the maths, they're at 13 tonne, utilise 11, divided by 2.5. We've now got 4,400 kilos of grass per cow available. And so the discussion was really, it was fantastic to be having it on the farm. So we're saying, well, look at your demand is going to be lower now, so you're probably going to need to be doing a minimum 40 grass walks a year to try and manage the surplus that's going to be on the farm at different times. You're going to need to get good days of grass, so it's only going to suit probably a drier farm, where you can get out to grass earlier. We talked about we don't need to build up to 1,000 of a farm cover now on the 1st of September because we don't have a high demand. We don't need to close as high. We can have slightly lower covers. We talked about maybe actually some farmers, because they're highly stocked, are delaying their calving date because they're just finding there's too much pressure on in the springtime. And on these farms we were talking about, we could calve a little bit earlier, get more days in milk. Those days, if the weather plays ball, and again, this is probably for a discussion for the drier farms, we get out to grass earlier, and it's a just totally different dynamic to the discussions that the higher stocking rate farms are having. Maybe we could keep heifers on farm a bit longer, and lots of different dynamics. So, like, I actually think with the discussion we've had, that's going to be a challenge from a utilization point of view to manage that system, but it's a lot of potential positives to it. So that's the interesting in terms of going low. And then like I would, practically as a consultant, look to lots of farm financial figures. Is there times where a higher stocking rate can make a bit more sense? And what I would see practically is like, the smaller farms close to 100 where there's still maybe a generation or maybe 2 generations trying to pull an income from the farm, the fixed costs there are extremely high. There's probably a little bit more sensitivity to it. Where the herd is really excellent and that feed coming in is going into really high quality cows and you're getting a better return back for it. There's a potential there for the stocking rate to make sense. Where facilities are really good. So like if the for farms where facilities, they don't have a cubicle per cow, they're tight in feed space, reducing stocking rate is an absolutely no-brainer. For farms that have those really good facilities in place already, maybe you won't see quite the benefit, but to go and spend that money to put those facilities in place to milk cows on that expensive feed obviously doesn't make sense. So there's a caveat there. And then where that stocking rate is supported by owned or cheaper land. So like in terms of owned land, maybe there's an out farm down the road, it's owned. Technically the feed coming off it is a bit cheaper. Technically we could be putting an opportunity cost on it. We could be renting it tax-free in Ireland, so is that right to do either? And then I do know like that in the UK, we're one step an island. You're an island as well, but we've much bigger tillage industry. Maybe there's parts of the UK where you can get feed a lot cheaper and the numbers will crunch a little bit differently. So they can. I'm not saying that they'll never crunch differently, but as a general principle, I think all the data we've gone through here stands fairly true. And the final bit of data that I want to throw at you is just that true cost of feed. And to be honest, this terrifies me a little bit. It terrifies me in terms of the land rental market in Ireland and where it's going, the cost that farmers are paying for rented out farms, and when we follow that through, what it's actually delivering in terms of the cost of that feed, and based on the cost of that feed, the profit it's delivering. So take it here, 5 different scenarios, paying from 250 to 350 an acre for an out farm. Putting in €71 an acre per year as a depreciation cost, so probably going to have to reseed it every 6 or 7 years, and maybe a bit of other tidying up. That means our effective rent, even if you're paying 250, it's costing you 321. Put a kind of a tree-cut system in for contracting. Again, it's going to depend on the distance from the out farm to the milking platform. But if we put 420 an acre in for maybe 3 different cuts, 260 an acre for fertilizer, to take on an out farm is going to cost between €1,000 and €1,100 per acre in terms of actually running it. And if we follow that through, then 3 different grass growth scenarios. So like the first one is, if the farm could grow 15 tonne for every single year, you can see there how the costs work through. So that's €194 per tonne of dry matter up to 213, or 19 cent a kilo up to 21 cent a kilo. Teagasc have set a target of around 22 cent a kilo as if we could be getting silage in for that price. But like, what are the chances that an out farm like that is going to grow 15 tonne every year? Maybe it'll do it the first year after it's seeded, maybe the second year. Our experience years 5 and 6, you're nearly talking about a full reseed again, and production is really dropping off. And so once you're back at 13, you can see here at 13 tonne and 250 an acre, I'm at 22 cents a kilo. At 13 tonne at 350 an acre, I'm at 25 cents a kilo. So 25 cents a kilo of dry matter, when at the minute meal is probably going to be under 300 this year. So you're growing silage that's effectively costing you close to meal. That's your winter cow feed, supporting cows like that. It's just the numbers are really not adding up. And I'm sure there's plenty of out farms that are growing 11 tonne, being rented at 300 plus. So in terms of what the land rental market is doing and the true cost of that feed, in a lot of cases, it's not making sense. There's still plenty of land being rented for less than €300 an acre. It's never talked about in the headlines. And so where that's the case, maybe there's an opportunity for that to make sense. But I suppose the key point is doing the data, crunching the numbers, fully seeing through what the feed is going to cost and what the impact is going to be on the farm system. That's my final bit of data. And my final kind of point then before I reach my conclusion is just, I suppose, as a consultant, seeing different farmers and seeing the knock-on effect of like a decision, what's impacting us now, and we kind of follow that back through. What led to that happening? What led to this happening? And the knock-on. So this is just an interesting example at the minute with one particular farm was overstocked in 2022, not enough silage made. Okay, so I follow that through. Spring 23 was a bad spring. Didn't make enough silage last year, so I was tight this year in 23. So during 2023, really focused on bulk, made very little quality. And then in spring 24, we got a bad weather, had no quality feed, milk production collapsed, got hit for the year. And so what actually impacted the business in 2024 was a decision made in 2022. And on this particular farm, they decided that the cull cow price they were getting at that time wasn't good enough. They carried some culls, similar story. But it's just so interesting in the farming business how a decision we make, a year and a half ago can affect our profits a year and a half or 2 years down the line. And that's where this whole stocking rate thing comes back in. And running a system that's less exposed to risk, less exposed to cost, means that you're less likely, I suppose, to make a wrong decision. Like I was talking about, the top 5% would have maybe acted here. They maybe would have said, I've done my winter feed budget. Maybe they would have been able to do a good deal for winter feed somewhere along the line. But it brings extra cost, extra decision making into it. And if you get that wrong somewhere along the line, the penalties can be like that farmer. 2024 milk production was terrible, and their whole year's profit in as a result was compromised. So it's just really interesting from a thought process point of view, the effect it can have. So in conclusion, do the feed budget, target 4,000 kilos of grass per cow on the milking platform, and that's a grass-rich system that will allow you to have a lower cost of production going forward. For us, doing the figures, crunching to that, it's actually surprisingly significant how big an impact a small change in stocking rate can make. As I said, a lot of the groups are now reducing their stocking rate, so it is happening. It's positive to see, and I think it can deliver lower costs, less work, less risk, less stress, and maintain or maybe even increase profits. And not to be worried about the terms of diluting the fixed costs as a kind of a dangerous argument to base around. And I think it in a lot of situations it doesn't actually stack up. So delighted to get the chance to present and have my say at the conference for once instead of asking the questions. I'd be delighted, and be a great opportunity now to go through it with Tom and Pierce. So thank you.